A warm welcome to all of you and a heartfelt namaste. I, Anuradha Sharda, would like to thank all of you for liking our content uh, and our channel. So, James, I am intrigued. Before I even introduce the topic, I'm intrigued. Why are you wearing a shawl which has got Om written and Indian symbol and Hindu symbols all over it?
It has come to my attention
Right.
that people say that my videos make them laugh.
Why?
Every time I do a video with you, you have this big smile, and I say, "Why is she smiling?" Oh,
Okay.
she thinks I'm going to make her laugh.
Is that?
And so I get emails from people. Oh, I love your videos; they make you laugh. Well, I'm here to amuse you. I feel like the character in Goodfellas. I amuse you. I'm here to make you laugh. So,
Okay. So you're
so
trying to be a
I just, in all fairness, I am a guru. I have written books. I chant mantras. Om Trambakam Yajamahe Shugandhi Pushti. I chant
what?
mantras. I am a guru. I think people should have some respect. So, just a little joke there. So I will now take this off. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so very much. But then, yes, people, you know what?
You're welcome.
You know what? I'll just tell you one more thing. The thing with you is that you make astrology sound very logical. I have a smile on my face because I feel that I'd read somewhere as a child that uh, honey attracts more bees than vinegar. So when you are happy, it makes.
Anuradha. I love that my videos make people laugh. Are you kidding? What I cannot stand, what I cannot stand is Westerners acting like gurus as they teach. I just, oh God, please. Okay,
Okay,
so
so that was a good
so
one on
I
me.
hope that I
And
made you laugh a
oh,
little
you
bit
made
today.
me laugh, you intrigued me, and you did the right thing. I mean, so I hope we all are starting on a very happy note with James playing the small prank on us. So today, James,
Okay, Neptune.
yes, today the topic is Neptune. And before I go, just so that I need to check James' chart because I've just made a video on comedy. I need to see if the planets, the houses, and the nakshatras really do work in his art. He's a natural prankster. So,
You
yes.
know, I've been thinking about this recently because, like when I have handymen and people like that come over, I start joking with them, and it takes them a while to get my sense of humor. And I have a brother who has Moon Jupiter conjunct in the fifth house. The fifth house is fun.
And
Okay.
yes.
I have Saturn in the fifth house. That's very serious. But the Saturn is aspected by Jupiter to the degree, I don't know, maybe it just runs in our family, but humor is everything.
Yes. So that was a very practical one. I need to check out your nakshatras also, James.
Okay, check the nakshatras.
Yes.
I
Okay.
forgot to say, I am a guru. I even write sutras.
Yes. And you're writing
I'm on I'm on a
Prahar
hundred.
Sutras.
I
Yes.
have written 120 sutras. It's
Yes.
about 65 pages, but it's probably going to be 300 or 400 when I'm done.
So
So
can you share just one sutra before we move on to Neptune with you?
what share what a sutra?
Yes, a sutra that you've written.
Hold on one second because I don't keep them in my head. I wake up in the morning. I wake up in the morning, and something will come into my head, and I'll say, "All right, let me write about it." Here's a sutra number 76. When analyzing a dasha or bhukti, always look at how the transits. So a person may have a wonderful Venus bhukti, but if Saturn is aspecting that Venus, that bhukti is not going to be so good.
Okay.
Or if they have a bad, I saw this the other day, it was a bad 2 or 3 year period, but Jupiter will come in as a transit and make it better for that 1 year. So that's one sutra. And another one, astrology is a burnout profession. That's another sutra. So by that I mean that astrology, when I do a reading, there is so much, and not just me, but all astrologers, when you do a reading, there is so much giving. There is so much giving. When it's over, everybody's exhausted. You know, the astrologer is quite
Yes.
tired after it's over. But as the years go by, you can burn out. And so the sutra advises astrologers to try to take maybe 3 weeks of work, 1 week off, or 6 months work, a month off. You need a break because otherwise you burn out, and that doesn't help anybody. And I also say that when you are doing a horoscope and the person tells you that they want to be a massage therapist, when someone tells me they want to be a massage therapist, I immediately say, okay, that's great. But look for a second method. As you're doing massage, learn acupuncture, learn something else, because after about 10 years, most people will burn out. It's too much energy going out. And a friend of mine had told me that I think he said in the Buddhist tradition, they say that if you're doing divination, if you're doing psychic and divination, it takes a toll as the years go by. You know, it really takes a toll. So those are two sutras.
Yeah,
I wake
so
up in the morning and I think, what am I in the mood to write?
so I was taught this that when we give remedies, when we ask people to do that, the fifth house is very strongly affected. So you have to keep replenishing your fifth house. So you also need a lot of levity, because fifth house is also laughter, so you do need to have levity around, and you also need to do your mantras, all these things on a very regular basis, so that you don't, just like James
Yeah.
said, have a burnout or let anybody else's karma start affecting you.
Mm.
Yeah.
And the thing about this is something, it's funny because students think that we know everything after a certain amount of time. It's not like that. We constantly learning.
None,
It,
yes.
it's only in recent years that I started looking at the fifth house to see whether the person considers life fun or serious. So
Serious.
I have Saturn in the fifth house, and I'm always working hard to do something to make a difference. And my brother with Moon Jupiter, let's go to the ball game. Let's go to Disney World. I'm serious. Life is nothing but fun for him with Moon Jupiter in the fifth, but I don't have that.
And would you believe it? I know somebody who's got Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, and Sun. So half the time, either the person is Europic, or other of the time is literally very serious. So there is no happy medium for such a person, Europic or
Mm,
serious. So on that note, we can get started with our Neptune. We've
okay.
been waiting for it for quite some time to come from you, James.
Okay. So Neptune through the houses. And I have to say that, I Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, I use them more in the Western horoscope. And over the years, I don't do as much Western as I used to. When I do a horoscope, I always look at both horoscopes because I'm going to get a certain amount of information from the Western that I won't explain the Western stuff, but I'll put in pieces of
Inculcate, yes,
information.
yes. Huh.
And there's something about Neptune that is different from Uranus and Pluto. Now, the three outer planets, I was talking with my wife about this. I have to tell you that when it came to talking about Neptune, I had to do a little bit of questioning. I emailed Dennis Harness because I said, Dennis, I have no idea what Neptune in the 8th house and the 12th house is. I mean, I have a general idea, but can you tell me something? And then I said to my wife, I said, listen, in 3 days, I have to talk about Neptune. I need you to start thinking about Neptune, particularly in the 8th and the 12th, because those are the ones that kind of get me. But as we spoke about it last night, I said, well, look, the three outer planets are malefics. She doesn't like that. She says, no, Neptune is beautiful. What I was saying was that it's very odd. See, there's the left. So uh, Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, which is a benefic. Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, of all things, of great benefic Venus. How can a planet that's a higher octave of Venus be a malefic? And she says, well, I don't consider it a malefic. I said, well, I do. So
Difference of opinion right at the beginning.
yeah. So well, no, I'm going to explain the good part and the bad part.
Right.
But I said, look, I might be a guy with where the glass is half empty and she's the half full.
Yeah.
Um, I found it fascinating that I was thinking, how can this planet that's the higher Venus cause so much trouble? So Neptune is like Ketu, but not exact. Neptune is like Ketu in that it rules illusion, deception, magic, film. They both do. Ketu and Neptune is mysticism and Ketu is metaphysical. So on the positive side, Neptune makes a person a mystic, depending where it is. I have the Sun conjunct Neptune within 3 degrees, and it's well aspected. It's aspected by other planets well. And I remember in my very early days of astrology, I was reading a book by C.E.O. Carter, who was a famous British astrologer. And Carter said that the Sun-Neptune conjunction was the most common feature in the horoscopes of predictive astrologers. I found this fascinating because you have humanistic astrologers that want to tell you how you behave and what the psychology is and what your experience is. But for me, I didn't want to do astrology when all I knew was Western. It wasn't predictive enough. So in any case, the Sun Neptune makes a person mystical and seeing things beyond the 5 senses. That's Neptune. Now, Neptune will give you the most idealistic kind of energy. The people that are most gullible. I'm very gullible because of the Sun conjunct Neptune.
Neptune.
Sun conjunct Neptune. I'm very, very gullible, and I believe people, and then I find out I get burned. That's the Sun Neptune being gullible, because it's very trusting, it's very mystical, but Neptune dissolves. Neptune dissolves. So if Neptune is in a house, this is what I tell a person if I'm doing the chart in person. If Neptune's in the 4th house, which is the mother, I say, you go to grab your mother and you can't find her. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. Neptune is in the 2nd house. It doesn't matter how much money you have, you feel like you don't have enough, or the money goes through you, illusion, deception. Neptune's in the 7th house. There's always going to be a partner with where there's illusion, deception, drugs, alcohol. So Neptune is a first-class malefic, no doubt about it. But it also gives, if you think about the higher octave of Venus, mystics and people that they're sick of the world. The world is a mundane place. Neptune is much more mystical and idealistic and like that.
Utopian.
Utopian, idealistic, utopian. Yeah. So Neptune in the 1st house. Now, whenever I talk about a planet in the 1st house, you always want to look at how close it is to the degree of the ascendant. Okay. So if Neptune is in the 1st house, say 5 or 10 degrees away from the ascendant, or 15 or 20 degrees from the ascendant, if it's in the 1st house, the person's going to lack confidence. So the 1st house is your confidence, your stability. I've always said the foundation of a horoscope is the ascendant, the moon, and the sun. That's the foundation. If Neptune is in the 1st house, that is going to take away the feeling of being solidly placed in the world. It just, it takes away the confidence. If Neptune is, and it makes the person mystical and spiritual. But if Neptune is like within 3-4 degrees from the ascendant, in terms of confidence, there is a complete zero. There's a complete void. There's nothing there. If Neptune is on the ascendant. Now, this is interesting because in order to gain enlightenment, the whole idea is to understand that the body and the physical presence is garbage. It's coming and going. So they feel that. They feel like, I don't have any presence in the world. I'm not real. I'm nobody. I have nothing. I'm worthless. but that makes them also spiritual. So they immediately gravitate toward mystical, spiritual, psychic stuff. But if it's really close to the ascendant, there's no doubt. If it's close to the ascendant, in a reading, I will tell the person, look, I'm going to tell you all these different features that you have in the horoscope, but the confidence here is there's like a zero, there's like a void, and they shake their head yes, and I say, so you deal with that, and we talk about how to deal with it. But that's what it does. It takes away the feeling of being solid. That's what Neptune is.
So
And they can now, if they want to do magic, if they want to do astrology, if they want to do film, anything like that, it's wonderful. But it's so
yes.
that's
So that means the person is actually, as you said, there's no feeling of solid, or rather, there's no surface beneath his feet. He doesn't know, he doesn't have a grounding, to come to think of it.
there's no grounding. There is zero. There's no ground underneath the feet.
Feet, exactly. There's no ground
There's
underneath.
nothing under the feet. It's like it's like I'm spinning in air, and
Yeah.
other people have their feet on the ground, and
Yeah.
they do this and they do that, and there's
Yes. Yes.
okay.
So Neptune
So
through second house.
now Neptune in the first house could make a person a drug addict or an alcoholic. It's certainly possible
Right.
because that person has no solid feel for the earth, so they are looking for something. They're looking for something, so they may try drugs or they may try alcohol. It's possible, but I wouldn't call a person. I wouldn't tell everybody that has that they're going to be alcoholic. Not that. Okay, Neptune in the second house. Money. Now the second house. Oh, I forgot to say this. I don't really use the Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto so much in the Hindu chart, so I'm looking at it in the West. So some of my descriptions here are going to be a little bit Western. In the Western chart, the second house is money, but it's also self-value, how you think you're worth.
Right.
So the person with Neptune in the second house might not charge enough money because they don't feel that they have value.
Yes.
But
That they
Neptune in the
were
second,
that much. Yes. Yes.
right, and Neptune in the second house, it doesn't matter how much money they make, they don't feel they have any money.
Yeah.
They just don't feel they have any. They could be wealthy, they don't feel it. Number two, there may be illusion and deception with money. So people will like, if Neptune transits the second house, I tell the person, listen, be careful, especially in the beginning, because you may have people coming to you and saying, hey, let's do this deal, we're going to get rich. And it's garbage, it's nonsense, bogus. That's Neptune.
Right. Right.
So the Neptune in the second house, I basically see that as not being very good for money and not so good for the person being able to value themselves. But I mean, that's mainly it. I don't find a lot of other meanings for that Neptune in the second. It's possible, you'd have to research this, but the second house in the Hindu is the food that you eat. It's possible that they may eat bad foods, they may eat alcohol, or they may eat bad foods.
Not
That's
palatable. Yeah. And James, just so that we get back to, we move on to that area where you just right at the beginning where you said that I keep laughing or I keep smiling too much. It's because your expression is so defining that it, and when you, especially when you just said it's garbage, so you feel, you can feel that it's actually a garbage. Thank you so much.
I had one friend who told me, she said, it's like I'm watching a movie when I see you.
Exactly. Exactly. It's very expressive. It's very expressive. So Neptune in the third house.
Well, I was an actor. I trained as an actor, and the
Okay.
worst thing to me is a boring speaker. I hate that. Okay. Neptune in the third house. Now this is going to be a little bit Western, a little bit. I mean, Neptune in the third house natally. There's no question. There's going to be troubles with siblings.
Hmm.
The troubles will not be like Mars or Saturn. Mars, you might fight with the sibling. Saturn, the sibling, you get nothing from the sibling, or the sibling has problems. But Neptune in the third house, that means the sibling could be crazy. It means illusion, deception, unstable. It's like Ketu in a way.
Right.
So the sibling could be weird, strange, crazy. And again, that same, as I said, you try to get a hold of that area and you can't. So
Yeah.
maybe if Neptune's in the third house, which is mechanical technical skills, it might be that when you try to learn something about mechanical technical or computers, it might be that it's just not there. But the same with the siblings. They can have a sibling and it's like there's nothing there. I got nothing from the sibling, nothing.
Right.
As
Or maybe,
opposed to Saturn or Mars, where you get something, but you also fight, or you know what I mean? It's different. Neptune is like, it's like the sibling might have never been born like that,
right.
but it could be that the sibling is very unstable. Now, the other thing about this is, in the Hindu system, I mean, in the Western system, the third house is the mind. Third house is the mind in the Western. In the Hindu, the fifth house is the mind. And I really keep those separate. There's no doubt to me that the fifth house is the mind in the Hindu. In the Western, a person with Neptune in the third house, they can be crazy. Now, of course, it's going to depend upon aspects to that Neptune and how Mercury is doing. But when I say crazy, I mean a wavering mind. But if it's a really badly aspected Neptune in the third house, they can have mental problems
Right.
because of that, in the
The-
Western
It's
mind.
the
So
mind. And another thing I just want to ask you is, could they be extremely bizarre kind of people? Because, extremely creative or extremely different thought process from others. Because as you said, Ketu, Neptune
thank
in the
you.
third.
Thank you. See, it's been so long. I have to tell you, we're moving. We're moving. And so my books are packed up. But I forgot. So I said, oh, let me go to see what Isabel Hickey said about Neptune. My books are all packed up. So, yes, the person with Neptune in the third house, the mind is open to the spiritual realities,
Realities.
which
Okay.
I had forgotten, but that is absolutely true. If I'm doing a reading and Neptune's there, I say, oh, so your mind is open to things beyond the five senses. Your mind doesn't have the limitations that other people have.
Right.
And if Neptune goes into the third house by transit, I will tell the person, so if you do any writing, your imagination's going to go wild.
Mm.
Neptune is imagination and idealistic and dreamy and mystical. So
Exactly.
when Neptune goes into that third house, I tell, when I'm looking at Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto with transits, it's from the Western system because I'm not using in the Hindu. So I do the Hindu chart, I say the dasha bhuktis, then I go to the Western transits. And if Neptune's going into that third house, I say you may still have trouble with siblings, but your mind's going to open up to things beyond the five senses. So that's a tribute to my wife because she loves Neptune. And I said I would say this. She has Venus trine Neptune, Venus in a very good aspect with Neptune. And I see that because it's people that have Neptune in the seventh house or Neptune with Venus, they're very idealistic about their partners and
Partners.
they're very loving and they're very giving. If you can find a person with, with Venus trine Neptune or something like that, go for that person because
They
they
will
don't
be
have
all out for you. Yes.
the norm, like when bad things happen, they say, oh, well, I'll let that go. That's not important. Because the important thing is the idealism with Venus because of the
Mm.
Venus Neptune. So she loves
Right.
Venus. Venus in the fourth house. I mean, Neptune in the fourth house. So this is a very rough placement, in my opinion. So Neptune, as I said, you can't grab, you can't find your mother. Now that can be because the mother's alcoholic, the mother is spaced out, the mother could be spiritual and mystical in such a spaced out, crazy way. There's people on the spiritual path that are grounded. Then there's people on the spiritual path that are just
Good.
flakes. We call them flakes.
Yeah. And they're up there in the sky. Yes, I totally
Yeah,
agree. Yeah.
high in the sky.
Yeah.
So the mother could be illusion, deception, confusion, alcohol, pie in the sky. Now Neptune in the fourth house is so bad for homes and
Hmm.
land. Termites, mold, water leaking. So when Neptune transits the fourth house, when it's going to hit that fourth house cusp in the Western chart, I always tell them, watch out for water leaks. Watch out for mold, termites, etc. If the person has Neptune in the fourth house natally, then I say, listen, when you go to buy a house, you got to check underneath everything, because that's what Neptune does. It erodes things. If Neptune transits the fourth, it's going to start eroding the home and causing problems.
Right.
The erosion is a slow process
So
of
you don't
eroding.
even, you're not aware of it also until it's too late.
Yeah, in the tarot cards, it's the card of the dogs baying at the moon. They're
Right.
baying at the moon because something is bothering them, but you don't know what it is. It's underneath the surface. Neptune's underneath the surface. So Neptune in the fourth house, I say, if you're buying a house as Neptune is transiting this fourth house, check everything. You'll hear stories where I bought this house, everything was great. Turns out I don't have access to the driveway. Somebody else has access. Weird stuff, It's just weird things come up. And Neptune is weird and strange, absolutely.
Okay. So Neptune to the fifth house.
Neptune in the fifth house is not. See, I'm a half full person. Perhaps my wife would say, "Oh, this is great. You're going to have a spiritual kid, idealistic utopian kid," and maybe that's true. If Jupiter's aspecting Neptune, maybe that's true. But as I see it, Neptune in the fifth house is going to be, you have a child, and the child's not what you were expecting, not what you were wanting, not what you might as well not have the child. Or the child could be drugs or alcohol or something like that. However, the child could be a mystic. But that could be very upsetting for a very earthy person. They say, what is this? My kid went and joined a spiritual movement. He's up in the clouds. Like that.
And
But
could it be the child could also be a scientist, a bizarre scientist, Frank Liston?
what kind of scientist?
A bizarre scientist, I
Bizarre.
mean, bizarre kind of a person.
The child could be in film. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about that. Film and photography and oil and gas. Neptune is like Ketu. But to me, the difference, I mean, really, when somebody wants to know, like oftentimes I'll be talking to a Westerner and I'm trying to describe what Ketu is. And I say, Ketu's like Neptune. Not exactly, but it's very much like it. Or the person that knows Hindu and they want to know about Neptune, I say it's like, but the difference to me is this. I mean, Ketu is everything weird, strange, illusion, deception, things underneath the surface. But Ketu is more metaphysical and psychic, otherworldly. Whereas Neptune is spiritual, but in an ungrounded, spaced out, idealistic, utopian way. I don't find Ketu people, if Ketu's on the ascendant or Ketu's with the ascendant ruler or the sun and moon, they go inwards. If a planet's next to Ketu, they go inwards to the spiritual plane. Neptune is their spiritual, but it's illusion, deception, and mystical. It's a different kind of.
Can we also say that Neptune Ketu moves them directly into a spiritual path, whereas Neptune takes them through a rigmarole before they find a path?
It's not that so much, because a person with Neptune on the ascendant, they're spiritual right away. Right away, they have no grounding, so they're looking out in the universe for this and that and the other. But what I'm saying is that Ketu brings you inward to the astral plane and into the psychic. The Neptune is you're looking for mysticism. You're looking for things beyond the five senses. If you get a Neptunian person, you could tell them anything. The reason that you are the way that you are is because your house was painted green, and that made you this way. You could tell that to a Neptune person. They go, really? I used to, because it's not grounded. With Ketu, you couldn't do that with Ketu. They wouldn't make any sense. I had a friend who was an astrologer, and she had Neptune right on the ascendant. Oh my God, we used to have these arguments and discussions and stuff, because when I do astrology, I have a lot of Taurus in the West, and I have Taurus ascendant in the East, and I'm more grounded, and I would go crazy. Her explanations for a horoscope were so
Bizarre, so different, and so So
Yeah.
difficult to comprehend. I can totally get what you're saying.
She would do a reading. I sometimes get people who say, I had a reading, but I didn't really get anything out of it. You know why? Because the astrologers are Neptunian type, and they use flowery words, and they go in and
Uh,
out, and
they were all
it's
over
like
the place, yes.
one of the sutras. One of the sutras that I was writing about, I was talking about the most popular books in the 60s and 70s, probably 50s, 60s, and 70s. Western astrologies books were written by Dane Rudger. Dane Rudger was French. He sold more astrology books than anybody. And he wrote 40 books. I don't know how many were astrology, but he wrote a ton of books. He was French. He could not put a noun and a verb together in a sentence. I would go to his books. I would read, because I'd be studying in the early days, and I'd want to know, what is Venus in the sixth house? I'd read his book. I'd read it. I couldn't figure out what he was trying to say. It was a bunch of words put together without a noun and a verb. And what's the sentence? What does it mean? I eventually threw them out. I would assert that he's probably got a
Ne-
very prominent Neptune, which goes
right.
all over the place. Now, Ronnie Dreyer, who wrote a bunch of astrology books, she said, oh, well, that's funny because I learned astrology from Dane Rudger. Not from him, but from his books. Because she would take the books and read them, and she would put together what these words, because they would be images. But I don't need images. I want to know, what does it mean? Does it do this or that? Okay.
So
So,
Neptune through this in the
wait.
sixth house.
So Neptune in the fifth house is not going to help you with investments and gambling.
Right.
Not going to help. Not going to help. It's
Mhm.
not going to help with children. It certainly is not going to help with love affairs. Now, it's not in the house of marriage. Okay, that's different. But in the house of love affairs, you could have love affairs with people that are very mystical and spaced out and unstable, but they could also be spiritual. But it wouldn't, but in those love affairs, you wouldn't be able to have anything solid with them. They would come and go, sort of thing.
So Neptune in the sixth house, James.
So Neptune in the sixth house, that's me. The sixth house is health. Neptune is illusion and deception and weird and strange. So Neptune in the sixth house, you get illnesses. You don't know what causes them because they're underneath the surface. They're caused by, now they can be caused by bacteria. That's Neptune. Like sometimes a person has some illness and they contact me, and I'll do a Prashna and I'll see Neptune in the sixth. I say, this is bacteria, germs or bacteria, something like that. But Neptune in the sixth house, you have health problems that are hard to diagnose. The key to Neptune in the sixth house is that you cannot generally cure the illnesses with drugs and medicines. Generally, you have to cure the illnesses through health and through natural homeopathy, Ayurveda, acupuncture, not chemicals and things like that. You heal it by proper living. The illnesses come through stress, emotional stress, and things like that. And it's a pretty rough aspect because of that. And Isabel Hickey used to say that the person had misused their physical body in a past lifetime, so that this time they get illnesses due to stress and emotional problems and things like that, but that you can't cure them through the normal medicines. Also, the person with Neptune in the sixth house is so sensitive. I'm one of the only people that I know that can't take a glass of wine or a beer. I'll do a half of a beer and I might be okay. If I do a beer, the next day it's like, oh, why do I feel like this? I could never get into drugs and alcohol, because if I put anything in the system, it'd be whacked out. It would be really, I would have terrible reactions to it. I'm gonna say this. When I was in high school, I went to the University of Miami Shakespeare Festival in the 11th grade. It was mostly professional, but they let high school kids come in to do smaller roles. And my my roommate was basically a drug addict. He was just really into pot and this and that. And one night, and I would never do it. And he had all his friends, and he said, "We're not doing it. We're not going to drop whatever we're going to drop until Jimmy does it with us." I said, "Get lost." But my willpower wasn't so strong. Eventually, I gave in. Whatever the hell he gave me, I don't know. It wasn't, well, it was a pill, okay? Whatever the heck it was, I saw God that night. I saw God that night. The tree was God. The sky was God. The janitor was God. God was everywhere. I'm serious. It was amazing.
Oh God, oh God. This
There
is
was so there was no sleep that night. We couldn't sleep. You just had to go. You had to go. The crash was so awful for someone with Neptune in the 6th house that I said, I will never. Now I saw God, but I would never do it again, ever. I mean, it was that bad. That's how now, of course, you could take half. So like a lot of times, if a doctor does give me something, I will say, give me less than you give other people, because my system is so delicate. That's what Neptune in the 6th house will do.
right.
I don't know anything else really so much about that, but if Neptune transits into the 6th house, then I tell the person, watch out for illusion, deception from coworkers. Illusion, deception from coworkers. I don't know if that happens natally, to be honest. Trouble, I don't know. But to me, it's mainly about health. Now, the 6th house is also the workplace. So it's possible that the work may be, like my work is Neptunian. I taught meditation, I do astrology. Perhaps that comes into play.
Uh, just a question here. Can it be something like you would be, you said that it's about co-workers. Could it also be that debts, because 6th house is also about debts. So the
No,
person,
not for me. For me, the 12th house is debts.
okay,
I could be wrong. I'd have to start looking now.
because
But see, I've always blamed my debts. I'm always in debt. I make a lot of money and then I'm in debt anyway. And I always blame it on my moon in the 12th house.
okay,
But I don't know, maybe it's related to Neptune in the 6th.
so it could be
But I
because
consider the 6th house enemies and jealous people
right.
and competitors and things like that.
Yeah, because what I was also wanting to ask is that because Rog, Rin, and Shatru, we in the Indian astrology, Vedic astrology, the word Rin, which means debt, the interest that you have to pay. Could it be that the person could be paying an overtly amount of interest at things, and he did not even anticipate that in the first place? Could it be also like that?
Well, yeah, you're asking the wrong astrologer. I can only say it would, that I think it would be if I see it from experience. You know me,
Right.
if I see it, maybe it is. I'd have to start looking. Now that I never told you this, but you say these things that I say, oh, that's crazy. And then and then as I'm doing my horoscopes, I start looking. Is she right? Let me see. Is she
Thank you
serious?
so much.
Well, that's how you learn.
Thank
That's
you
how you
so
learn.
much. Thank you so
But
much.
I but I have to see that it works. Otherwise, I say no.
Mhm. Right. So
Okay,
as we talk about Neptune in the 7th house, because I'm still waiting for the 8th and the 12th, which you said that was quite interesting.
I have to go get my wife and bring her. Um,
Please do. That will be a good thing to introduce her to the public.
she's shy of the camera,
Okay.
but I'll tell her and see what she says.
Okay.
Okay, so Neptune in the 7th house. You better marry a mystic, because
Oh,
otherwise you're going to have trouble. Neptune is illusion and deception. And Neptune is the higher aspect of Venus. So it's all about feeling, it's utopia. So when a person has Neptune in the 7th house, they almost always have somebody cheating on them. Or
hmm.
the partner can be fine until they get married, and then they get into drugs or alcohol. Those are Neptune. So I tell them, you must marry a person who is mystical and pursuing God. It's okay if they're spaced out, if they're flaky, that's okay. Because otherwise, it's going to be illusion and deception. And what I tell them also is something they learn by the age of 30, 35, they learn this. I tell them, you have Neptune in the 7th house. When you find someone that you like, before you date them, you go to your friends and you say, does that look like somebody normal? Does that look like somebody I could ever relate? I'm serious, because it's amazing. The person with Neptune in the 7th house, they feel so much.
Yes.
It's all about feeling, that they don't see the partner clearly. They get together with the partner and their sisters and their relatives and their friends say, what the hell are you doing with that person? Because it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit at all. But they can't see it because it's all about feelings. Oh, I love him so much. And there's no boundaries.
Yes. So they're all up in
So,
the cloud till somebody has to pull them and get them on the earth and see, look,
yes.
this is the person you're getting married to.
But you
Be
have
aware.
to understand, you know, I should have used the term no boundaries. And if all my books weren't packed away, I would have. No boundaries is the key to Neptune. There's no boundary. The boundaries aren't like 10 miles away, 20 miles away. They're not, but as far as Mars, it's galaxies. There's no boundaries at all with Neptune.
Right. Okay.
None. So the person, somebody else will look at the person they're in love with, and they see a crazy person. They see a person who's quirky, who's messed up, who's all kinds of things. And the person themselves, they don't see it because they have all this feeling, and there's no boundaries. The boundary would be, oh, he acts strange, or he does this, or he does that. That's a boundary, but they don't see boundaries.
Right.
Yeah. So when Neptune enters the 7th house by transit, I say watch out for illusion, deception from the spouse or the partner. But the partner may suddenly begin to be spiritual or mystical. Okay. But if Neptune is going into the 7th house by transit, I say keep an eye out to make sure that the marriage is, that something weird or strange isn't coming into the picture. And that's going to be with all partnerships, not just the you know, they
Not
could
just
get cheated.
not just the personal ones. What you're talking about is it could also be
Business.
in the professional or business.
Yes. If it's a partnership, the partner could be deceiving.
Okay. So Neptune in the 8th house.
Okay, so I'm thinking Neptune in the 8th house, and I'm thinking, well, that's a wonderful placement for astrology, metaphysics. So the 8th house is like Scorpio. It's astrology, it's deep, it's mystical, it's transformative. The 8th house is transformation. You go to therapy, you go to counseling for the 8th house, and you love spiritual and you love mystical, etc. But what about the fact that Neptune always brings problems? Neptune, you try to get a hold of something and you can't get a hold of it. So maybe that would be troubles with
In-laws.
partners' money. Partners' money. To me, the in-laws would be more the 3rd house, but for me. But the 8th house would be partners' money, or money with the IRS, the taxes, money with
Insurance companies.
insurance, but it would also be credit cards, mortgages. So
Right.
you could have Neptune could go transiting into the 8th house, and suddenly, 2 years later or a year later, the bank says, hey, you haven't been paying such and such. Well, why didn't you tell me this years ago? Now Neptune goes in and you find out the problems. But I asked Dennis Harness, I'm going to read it here because it didn't stick. There could be death because 8th house is death, there could be death by drowning or drugs overdose. And he said interest in psychology, metaphysics, mysticism, good intuition, need for grounding. Need for grounding. Yeah. But honestly, the two placements, probably this is why I had no feeling for this, okay? The 8th house and the 12th house, I think those are the two houses that could use Neptune energy better than others. And from the time that I started astrology, probably because I have Jupiter opposite Neptune, Jupiter opposite Saturn, exact degree. From the time I started astrology, I was always warning people. I wasn't saying, oh, there's a great period coming. I was warning them, watch out for this, watch out for that. So when it comes to Neptune in the 8th and the 12th, those are good placements. So I said, what does this mean? But it is really good for astrology, metaphysics, mysticism. But there could be something with drugs or alcohol there. It's possible.
Right. Okay. So when Jupiter
Wait,
enters the eighth,
wait.
sorry, wait, Neptune, yes.
This could be, this could easily be because the 8th house is wills and legacies.
Hmm.
So you have Neptune in the 8th house, you're waiting for your pension, you're waiting for the money that somebody left you, and you go to grab it and it's not there. So Neptune in the 8th house could mean that somebody's leaving you a lot of money, but something gets in the way and stops it. That's a
Negative side of, yes, the negative side of it.
strong possibility. You're not going to be able to get a hold of money from unearned means.
Yes. And
And that would also mean it wouldn't be surprising if you had Neptune in the 8th and you come to find out that you're living your life and your partner's handling the money, and you come to find out that you're actually millions of dollars in debt and your spouse has been completely mismanaging the money. It wouldn't be, that would be a Neptune in the
in
8th
the
house.
eighth house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So when Neptune transits through the eighth house, you tell people that you have to be very aware of how your money is being uh, working or something like that.
But the money, but there's a difference between Neptune in the 2nd house,
And the
which is
eighth house.
not so good for making money, but it's illusion deception. But Neptune in the 8th house is money with other people.
People,
It's
yes.
money with taxes, money with wills, legacies, money with insurance companies, money with credit cards, money with mortgages. It's money with other people, whereas the 2nd is just your own money.
Right.
Yeah.
So as Neptune moves into the ninth house, how would we, sorry, rather, when Neptune is in the ninth house, how would we interpret it?
So Neptune in the 9th house is a good placement if you have a mystical bent. In other words,
Yes.
if the rest of the chart is spiritual, the Neptune in the 9th is going to lead you to a Neptunian guru.
Hmm.
So you can go to there are gurus that are very strict.
Hmm.
There are gurus that are very intuitive. Like a person has Ketu in the 9th house, they go to the psychic, shy, hermit-like gurus.
Hmm.
If Neptune is in the 9th house, then you go to the guru who is a utopian mystic. It's a completely different kind of, like, when I talk about religion and philosophy, it's very solid. I was in the TM movement for 8 years, and the guru had rules and regulations and laws and this and that. Person with Neptune in the 9th house would hate that. They would hate that. Or if you read my non-duality book, Living Reality, it's very practical, down to earth. Person with Neptune in the 9th house is not going to like that. They want something where there's no boundaries to what is possible spiritually.
Hmm.
They might be talking about, the idea that there's parallel universes, or, there's this one theory that I keep hearing in different places, that everything that's happening now happens to us again over and over and over again. This makes no sense to me. But it's one particular concept, that we live the
Yes.
same exact life with every single moment again. But somebody with Neptune in the 9th, that would be like, okay, oh, that's really far out. Like, now
Yes.
the Neptune in the 9th house could easily be that the person studies with the guru for years and years and years, and then they find out that the guru is having sex with the secretary, or the guru is stashing away the money. Illusion, deception with the guru. That's
Right.
not going to be odd.
Unreasonable. Yes, unreasonable there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty typical.
And then what happens when Neptune is passing through the ninth house on a
Well, I
transit?
would say then that the person is likely to be going. Well, first of all, they need to watch out for their guru.
Hmm.
They need to watch out for their guru. Suddenly, you're going to find out what you didn't know about them, the bad stuff. But otherwise, they could suddenly become a little bit more mystical about their spiritual stuff. They could suddenly have a stronger interest in the religion philosophy. I think it could go both ways. You know,
Could they also start talking or studying, doing some higher knowledge studies? Because it's also the ninth house is also the your post graduation or the graduation where they can take up things like psychology, phys- uh, uh,
sure,
or
sure.
philosophy, things that normal people wouldn't want to move into those
Well,
areas.
the philosophy would expand.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm very grounded and earthy, but if Neptune transit my ninth house, suddenly I might start having those concepts that I otherwise consider, you know, flaky or weird or strange.
Just
The boundaries would slip away.
just for records, at the moment Neptune is transiting your ninth house.
It is.
Yes.
Mm.
So, because when we see the outer planets in a Prashna chart, it'll show you the planet at the moment. So it is transiting
Well,
through
it's very
Capricorn.
interesting. That's very interesting because I am having some interesting. There's some interesting things going on with two gurus of mine. One is my teacher Padia, who's 80 in Bombay, and somebody went for an astrology reading from him, and I heard feedback that was very strange and weird, which I didn't expect. And then my guru, my non-duality teacher, I should say, uh, you know, he's got stuff going on in his life that is, you know, just very sort of bizarre and odd. I won't go into details, but but I also have Saturn transiting my ninth
Ninth
house,
house, yes.
2020, 2021, 2022. You know, and so I'm suddenly hearing these stories about Padia and this guy, you know.
Yeah. So, as we move into the 10th house with Neptune in the 10th house, how would you
So
relate?
so with the father, you go for your father and he's not there, or the father could be alcoholic, or the father could be drug addict, or the father could just be plain emotionally not there. Okay.
Hmm.
On the career, it's not so good. You can't get a hold of the career. It causes, usually if Neptune is in the 10th house, then usually in the Hindu chart, I'm going to find something like the 10th ruler in the 12th,
Hmm.
or the 12th ruler in the 10th, something, or the 10th ruler in the 8th, something which is going to, or the 10th ruler fallen. If Neptune's in the 10th, you're usually going to, because they didn't use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in the ancient times, because they couldn't see them. They knew about them, but they couldn't see them. But the Neptune in the 10th house person, they're going to have you know, weird stuff about the career, karma in the career, numerous careers. They don't know their dharma. They had a career they wanted to do. Nature got in the way. All that weird stuff. But if Neptune is in the 10th house, I say you've got to be doing a spiritual career. You have to do a career where there's less boundaries. The more boundaries there are in the career, the less it's going to work. In fact, the Neptune in the 10th house, probably the most typical thing about Neptune in the 10th house is confusion of career.
Right.
Confusion. I don't know what to do. Um, but if they do, like as soon as I see Neptune in the 10th house, I start looking for a spiritual career in the Hindu chart. Like what, you know, 10th ruler in the 12th, it does cause confusion and problems and this, but it's a perfect placement for a spiritual career.
Yeah.
Now, if they
Any
want to do, go ahead.
occult practices or anything, any such vastu, occult,
Yeah, yeah.
mysticism, anything will do. Yeah.
But film and photography, especially, also
Okay.
film and photography.
Right.
Now, the other thing is when Neptune transits the 10th house, I tell them, look, this is the time to do what you have always wanted to do. Your ideals, your utopian vision for the world. This is the time for that.
Okay. That's a good point for all you people out there. The Arians, it's a good place because Neptune is transiting towards with your 10th house in your 10th house. So go for it. Do something for the universe that you want to do, at least for your bit of sky. So as we move into the 11th house with Neptune in the 11th house, what do you say, James?
So the Neptune in the 11th can be where the major goals and desires are spiritual. The Neptune in the 11th, you go to get to your eldest sibling and there's nothing there. And by the way, when I say there's nothing there, that doesn't mean the person doesn't have an eldest sibling. No, yeah, they could have one. They do have one probably. It doesn't stop them from having the physical younger sibling if it's in the third, or the eldest sibling in the 11th. But when you try to get a hold of them, you can't. They're not there. They're
You're not
missing.
connecting with them in one way or the other. Any which ways, you cannot connect with them at all.
Right. But it's something about that person. That person, nobody's going to connect with that person, most likely.
Okay.
Most likely. But I would say it's not so helpful for achieving the major goals and desires, unless it's spiritual. And the friends and the groups will be mystical and spiritual and Neptunian. So they're going to have friends that are spaced out, or they could have friends that are drugs and alcohol, or they can have spiritual, mystical, utopian, idealistic friends.
Okay. And when it's
And if it goes into the 11th house,
right,
by transit, then I say, listen, you better watch out. Your friends could be getting weird or strange or illusion, deception. I would also say that now that Neptune's coming into the 11th house, you may start really thinking about the goals changing. The goals, you may have had certain kind of goals in mind for your lifetime and what you wanted to achieve, and they may now become much wider, much bigger, like that.
right. And so finally, the 12th house.
The 12th house. I have to say, I think the 12th house is the best because Neptune rules Pisces, which is the 12th sign of the 12th, it's a 12th sign. So to me, that's the best placement. And that is spiritual. It's just completely spiritual. So that to me is a kind of a quintessential placement for a person who's going to go trying to find God, trying to find nirvana, trying to find infinite.
So the dreamy state that people generally are. So, people say when we're talking about the Pisceans, we're talking about somebody who's right there up in the stratosphere. We have to keep calling them back to Earth. So this really defines
but this is a planet in its own sign, so to speak.
Right.
So I wouldn't attribute the more negative to it. I wouldn't say they have to be pulled down. I would say they are a true mystic. Now, everybody in the audience, there'll be 1/12 of the world, 1/12 of your viewers, and they say, I have James Braha said I'm a true mystic. But it's true. Neptune in the 12th house would be somebody who has a really good, positive use of the utopia, idealism. And the utopia means the vision of a world which is beautiful and which works and which is, people are basically good. It's
exactly.
So the Neptune in the 12th house I think is a wonderful placement. Now, Dennis Harness said need for seclusion, escapist tendencies. He said addiction tendencies are possible. But he also said great for meditation and yoga. And he said love of islands and out of the way travel.
Right. So what happens when this Neptune is transiting towards the...
You will have to get Dennis Harness and ask.
When we're talking about transits, I want to ask just one small question.
If Neptune goes into the 12th house, what I would actually tell a person is that you're coming to a 12-year period, which is really going to be super good for meditation and spiritual. But I would also say this: when any planet transits the 12th house, then the 12th house is the subconscious mind. I know you mentioned the third, but third being also, but the 12th house is your sleep, your ability to go to sleep at night, and it's good sleep or bad sleep. And it's the subconscious mind. So when a major planet goes into the 12th house, I always tell that person, you're going to start having a lot of dreams at night. You're going to start remembering your dreams, because things from the subconscious mind are going to start coming to
resurfacing,
to the surface, and then you can deal with them. The Neptune, when Neptune goes into the 12th house, I would have to say that's the best time for dealing with the subconscious issues and things like that. I mean, it's really Neptune through the 12th would be the best time for for the spiritual,
Definitely.
mystical, yoga.
That's a beautiful description that we're ending up. Generally, people say when we're talking about the 12th house, people generally end up saying a lot of negative things. When a planet is in the 12th house, it can do this, it can, you have to learn to let go, you have to learn to do this. But for once, we're getting a good feedback on a planet in the 12th house. So on a very happy note, James, next time let's take up the conjunction of Neptune with different planets and go ahead
So
with that.
sounds good. I
Thank you
hope I
so much.
made you, I hope I made the people laugh today.
You certainly made me laugh, James. I don't know about others. Thank you so very much, James. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please hit the bell icon for fresh updates. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on the videos, and please subscribe to our channel.